Our theme today is autumn / reflections. And we have a full, we're going to have to hurry through and make sure everybody gets on. Our first teller is Joyce Harmon. Joyce will talk about a character named Daniel in her story, which reflects her own life. Joyce grew up with animals and now lives with two 80-pound basset hounds named Dragon and Rags, a cat named Callie, two dwarf Nigerian goats, Annabelle and Kona, who love to visit when someone forgets to close the gate. And last but not least, four scattered-brained hens with no names but delicious eggs. Joyce's favorite fall memory is at one point they had a pumpkin farm. She loved to watch the kids, especially the young ones, go out and find out that perfect pumpkin. When they went, "I've got it," she had great joy. So, without further ado, live from downtown Sacramento, California, Joyce Orman.
The first thing I have to do is, this is Daniel. This is the blue-eyed hare. Make sure that everybody knows that a hare is a species of rabbit. The closest I've ever come to a hare is a jackrabbit, which love to chase out in the field, and they used to eat our alfalfa. Here goes, the blue-eyed hare. Daniel was the best beekeeper in all of Northern Ireland. He was tall, he was good looking, he was a great catch, but nobody ever caught him because his favorite thing to do was being isolated on his little farm where he had his bees and all of his animals. And guess what? He sang and talked to his animals all the time. And one day when he was headed up into his little cabin on the porch, there was a hare. Now, hares don't usually come. They're never domesticated. Well, he scooted around the hare and reached, and it went. Okay, that's unusual. I'll leave the door ajar so that you can go out whenever you please. He went on with this. He noticed the hare curled up on the hearth. Didn't bother him. He went to bed that night, expecting the hare to be gone in the morning. But it wasn't. He followed him out like a dog. Went out to take care of the animals. He had introduced the hare to all the animals, especially the bees, and they seemed to get along just fine. Time went on. The hare was a constant companion. Well, one day, an old lady came up the lane and in through the gate, and Daniel went out and said, "Good afternoon, ma'am. You'll be wanting some honey?" "No, I want that hare." "You want the hare? Here, good coins, gold coins, see? Good coins. The hare's not for sale." "Don't tell me, young man. Don't you tell me that. I want that hare." And she got louder and louder, and she was just attacking Daniel. Pretty soon, the bees started circling her head, and she backed up, and she went away, and the bees chased her all the way out the gate. Now, not too long after that, when Daniel was in the market to sell his honey, he said to his friend, "Who is that old lady you see out there on the edge of the town?" He says, "Elders say that's a witch, Now, I don't believe in witches. Daniel says, I don't either. So he told his friend, and just to be on the safe side, you better keep that hare close to you whenever you're not on your farm. So Dan went home and he built a pouch. And the hare, whenever they went off the farm, jumped in, and they had a flap. The hare could stick its head out the window, or it's when he wanted, when he ever wanted. Summer went on, and it got to be about this time of year, you know, when migrations start. And the gypsies went by on the lane. Dan waved. Later on, he and the hare were going to go for a walk. The hare hopped into his pouch, and they went out and opened the gate. And as they stepped out on the lane, what should they find? But a huge, well, not huge, a large sack of grain. Oh, the gypsy caravan must have lost this. They can't be too far. And he picked it, threw it over his back, and went down the lane after them. We're caught up not very far. He waved. Hey, I have something. I think it's for you. What? Isn't this grain? Doesn't this grain belong to you? Yes, it does. Thank you. We'd have been really have trouble. We wouldn't have made it all the way home. And so he said, put the grain back in the wagon and said, come on, have a cup of tea. You must be hot, thirsty from all that traveling. Okay. So we went in, they sat down, and what's that you have there? A hare. Haven't you ever seen a hare before? Yeah, but not like that. That hare has sky blue eyes. It's bewitched somehow. I don't know, but I'd get rid of that hare if I were you. This is perfectly harmless. Been living with me for months. Let me grip my Granny. Granny, come over. Come here. Well, the old gypsy lady came over and she said, look at that hair. That ain't no hair. Sure it is. Look, ears. That's a bewitched being. Some witches cast a very bad spell. Daniel said, what can I do? Nothing you can do. You're a helpless mortal. Granny, there must be something you can do to help. He brought our grain back. All right. You got one chance, and it's not a very good one, and I don't guarantee that it'll work. Hallows Eve is coming soon, and the witch's spell will be weakest at midnight. You go and you take that hair as far away from that witch as you can get. And then at midnight you say, I wish the spell be broken. I wish the spell be broken. I wish the spell be broken. Remember, 3 times. So Daniel said, thank you. And he went home and they got ready. He explained to all the animals that they would be gone all day, all night, and probably most of the next day. He gave them extra food, extra water. The bees were already settling in for the winter, so we didn't have to explain much to them. And in the morning of Hallow Eve's evening, they started out and they walked and they walked. And then it got dark, but luckily for them, a huge moon. So they had lots of moonlight to travel by. And they traveled down the lanes. And it was getting closer and closer to midnight. Just about as Daniel was about to give his 3 wishes, because the old lady didn't say it had to be exactly at midnight, just close to midnight. So he thought he'd better. Then a black cloud went across. Well, Daniel was like, I wish the spell be broken. I wish the spell be broken. I wish the spell be broken. And there was a lot of movement, and he was trying to hold on, but it just was gone. I tried my best. He looked into 2 beautiful sky blue eyes. They happened to be lodged in a very pretty maiden. Well, off they went the next morning. They passed a church on the way. They had decided to get married. They got married and they went back to the farm. And I would tell you that this is the end of the story and they lived happily ever after. But there's a note. The next market day, Mary and Daniel went to the market. And as they pulled into the market, his friend said, hey, did you hear the news? The old witch is dead. Dead? How? When? Where? Well, where? Right at your gate. When? Halloween's night. How? Well, you're not going to believe this, you being a beekeeper. Doc says she was stung to death by bees. Daniel says, that's ridiculous. The bees don't come out at night. And you know, my bees are already in for the winter. I told him that, but he says, no, that's what happened. Daniel and Mary looked at each other, smiled. They went home and they did live happily ever after. But they never said who killed the witch. Who do you think killed the witch?
Thank you very much, Joyce. That has all the elements of a great story, a love affair, scary stuff, conflict, and very nice, very good show. Our next teller is Ed Lewis. Probably everybody knows Ed. Ed is a storytelling groupie who attends as many storytelling events as possible. He just returned from a national event in Kentucky or Tennessee. He was a board member of the Storytelling Association of California, the Sacramento Storytellers Guild, as well as the Pacific Region representative to the National Storytelling Network. Ed's a retired teacher of young children, as well as an early childhood education professor, telling stories to children throughout the world as Eddie Spaghetti. He has taught storytelling classes for teachers and performed for adults, sharing personal stories and tales since '94. His autumn memory: while helping a team of Irish laborers build a sewage plant in Arundel, England, I had a day off, rented a tuxedo, and escorted a wealthy young woman from Boston to the Duke's Ball in Arundel, where I was selected to dance with the Duke's daughter. And then he doesn't go on to say whether he turned into a pumpkin at midnight or not. But here's Ed.
Okay, thanks. All right, how's that set up? Good, Joyce? All right. So the story I'm going to share with you today is from my childhood. The hags are coming, the hags are coming, they will be here soon. It was a typical Halloween day on Lopez Island in 1955 with a gang of 3 boys, Ralph the Runt, Big Mike, and me, Eddie Spaghetti. We met every weekend day, and especially on Halloween day, down at the docks, where we took our boat to go out, our rowboat, to check the crab nets we had set out. Ralph the Runt, he was 9 years old. He was the weakest of us. He would roll in the harbor. And then when we got out to the open Puget Sound where our crab pots were, Big Mike would take over and he'd row us through those waves. Now I was up in the bow. I wasn't the strongest, but I was known as the best balancer in all of the Lopez Island community. Now, the Lopez Island is part of the San Juan Island chain, just south of Vancouver Island in northwestern Washington. So when we got out to those crab pots, I got up on the top and we had 5 different setups and I pulled them in and Big Mike's keeping it steady as we could. And we got the 5 crab pots in and we brought them back to my mother. And we had 10 good-sized Dungeness crabs. And my mother made the best crab dip you could ever imagine. And of course, we ate them with Lay's potato chips. We took them down to our fort down at Agate Beach, right below where we used to live. And we had built this fort and we hadn't quite finished it. And we knew we had to finish it that evening because we were going to prove once and for all that our school teacher was a hag. And for those of you who don't know this, hags come out on Halloween evening, late at night, usually around midnight. So we had to finish our place in a hurry because we wanted to go trick-or-treating before we went to find the hag. And we weren't quite finished. So we got some boards and we finished the roof on our fort. And then we went into the forest close by and got some leaves and straw and boughs and brought them in for our bedding. And we laid our sleeping bags out. And then we did what you have to do. And if you are ever worried about a hag, take note of what I'm about to tell you. You have to take your best dress shoes, church shoes usually, and you put them at the foot of your bed, or in our case, the foot of our sleeping bags. Then you have to take 4 paper matches, take them out, and you have to twist them and put them in your hair. Then you have to take a Bible, open it up, and put it in the doorway of wherever you happen to be. Because what happens is if you're asleep and the hag comes into your living quarters and there's an open Bible, she has to stop and read that Bible. And it takes a long time to read that Bible. So she won't be there coming in before the sunlight comes up, because when the sunlight comes up, she's got to get back to her house, or otherwise she will just dissolve into the earth. So we did all that, went out trick-or-treating, and then we instituted our plan. We ran up to the local cemetery because we knew that's where she was going to come that night. Now, the reason we knew this is because our big brothers and sisters had told us this legend before, so we knew it was true. So we're up there at the cemetery waiting for our school teacher, the hag, to come in. But we had a further plan. We were going to get rid of this hag once and for all, and especially our school teacher, who we didn't really care much for. Anyway, so we got up to the caretaker's shed. Big Mike and Ralph the Runt waited there, and I was a fast runner at the time. I ran over to the school teacher's house and I got underneath a willow tree and I had my bag of salt and I just waited. And right at midnight, she came out of her front door onto the porch and she peeled off her skin from her head down to her toes and she laid it over the railing. And as she creaked with her bones going out through her gate, her eyes with blood dripping and little pieces of flesh hanging off, she just seemed to peer right into my soul. But she kept going and she's singing that song. The hags are coming, the hags are coming. So she kept doing that, and I did what you have to do if you want to get rid of a hag. I ran up to the porch. I took the skin and my bag of salt and I poured salt all over throughout that skin. And then I hightailed it back to the cemetery. But she hadn't got there yet. And I met up with Ralph and Mike and we waited. And here she came in the gate singing her song with her bones just creaking and blood and guts dripping off. And she came over to the first gravesite, but she couldn't go into that gravesite because, as many of you probably know, if there's something current on that gravesite, like flowers or a medal or a picture, she can't go in there. But this gravesite, the cemetery, has graves that go back to the 1800s. So she moved around and got to one, and then she started singing her song, and she just dissolved right into the grave where she could suck out the souls of whoever was there. And we watched her do this throughout the night. It was about 3 hours, and then she came out and singing her song. She creaked her way back to her house, and we ran as quick as we could. We got up into that willow tree and we waited for her. And when she got on that porch, she put on her skin. And when that salt touched her body, she dissolved down into the earth, never to be seen again. Now, the next day, when school was on Monday morning, we all came to school and there was no school teacher. All the kids said, what happened to our school teacher? And they sent out a search party, and we all kept silent about it because we knew no one would believe us, except maybe our brother and sister. And legend has it, if you go up to the islands now, legend has it that the school teacher hag of 1955 must have been walking along one of the cliffs up on above where the Puget Sound, the cliffs fall down into Puget Sound. And we have 3 pods of killer whales up there that are still up there to this day. And the legend says that she probably fell off that cliff and one of the killer pods got her and took her down to their lair, where she may still be there to this day. But now we, the gang of 3, we knew the truth. And they're still around, Ralph the Runt and Big Mike. We talk about this quite a bit. And now you know the true story of the hag of Lopez Island. So please sing with me. The hags are coming, the hags are coming. They will be here soon.
He's not, because he's the wrong order. He's not that. So, let's move. Okay, let's see. Let me just see. Alex, is it okay? We got this guy that we're having these problems with technologically. Oh, okay. We'll get you on. Okay. Let's call him and tell him like 20 more minutes. Okay. Okay. All right, Ed. You had fun with that one today. You just had fun. That was so cool. There was no stage presence at all. It was just fun. That was really cool. That was really cool. So our next performer, teller, is Alex Ives. And Alex is a first-time teller, and we're really happy to have her here today.
Yeah.
Alex performs in, this is also her harp, which you can't see in the corner. Alex performs in many local groups on the harpsichord, the hurdy-gurdy, the accordion, and recorders, as well as harp. She currently plays with the Melodica Harp Duo, the Jamalion Celtic Band, and Baroque and Beyond. Her first foray into storytelling with harp was to accompany storyteller Mary McGrath. Today's effort is her first as a teller, with much thanks to Mary's coaching. So her favorite fall memory is from shortly after they bought their house. And they could look east down the hill from the house. And the trees were golden, the sun was setting, their shadows were 15 feet long. And he said, "This is my favorite vision. I want to remember it forever." And then they both jumped into the 5 feet pile of leaves that they just raked up.
Yeah.
So we have preserved it. It has been remembered forever. So here we are, Alex Ives. Thank you.
This looks harder than it is. This is very lightweight.
You're real strong.
I'm really strong. My parents met in San Francisco during World War II. My father was stationed there. My mother owned a dry cleaning shop. They fell in love. They got married. And eventually, they had an absolutely adorable baby. That would be me. After the war was over, a little bit, my dad got a new job, and when I was just 4 years old, we moved across the bay to the little village of San Lorenzo. Where all the moms stayed home. This wasn't quite what my mother had in mind, but she was a person who took advantage of whatever came her way. And she had always wanted to play the piano. So I got piano lessons. And now I had just turned 4. I was not a precocious child. I wasn't one of these kids who could read before they went to kindergarten, got up in the morning and read the New York Times. No. Nor was I a little Mozart. No, I was also not a musical prodigy. I was a 4-year-old kid, slightly below average. This didn't bother my mother. She arranged that I would be able to take piano lessons with Mrs. Spencer. And Mrs. Spencer's claim to fame was that she had been a movie theater pianist. And now she was reduced to teaching children to play the piano. Now, I don't know if I was the youngest student she ever had. I bet I was. And because her first way of teaching me to play the piano, or, was to say, okay, here is a staff. Now, if you've played an instrument, you know what a staff looks like. There's 5 lines, 4 spaces. And she said to me, the unprecocious child, the spaces spell the word face. I don't know any letters. I certainly can't put them together. And this does not look like a face to me. But I am a compliant child, and I agree. The next thing she says is the letters are E, G, B, D, F. Every good boy does fine. I knew some boys And they were bratty. They were not fine. But I was a compliant child and I agreed. So then, now that I have mastered these two things, she hands me my first book. And it's a red book. John Thompson's Teaching Little Fingers to Play.
Oh, God.
Had a shield on the front of it. Well, I was delighted because I had little fingers and now I was going to play the piano. Of course, there was that pesky thing about those letters, but let that go. And as soon as we opened the book, on the first page is a picture of two hands. And the fingers are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can read numbers and I can count to 5, even though I'm not that many yet. And so I'm happy because now I know that, you know, this finger is 3 and this is 1. And when I look at the song has the numbers over the notes. So the first song goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1. Well, I am a child prodigy. So I actually make it through the first book, and at some point during that first book, it appears to me that I did learn to read music. And my favorite song in there was a song about some swans that had been had a curse put on them. And they were waiting for someone to come along with a magic wand and change them into princes. This was a lovely sounding song. And I myself, who considered myself a princess, was well ready for a prince. I'm ready. My parents always had me play for other people who came to the house so that everyone would know that they had a child prodigy. And other people always agreed that I was, because they wanted a second drink, they had to. So time goes by and I get into the next book. And the next book is a little bit harder, but you know, I've gotten a little bit better. I'm still 4 years old. I still haven't started kindergarten yet. And my favorite song was Country Gardens. And I could play it quite well. So one week I go to my lesson and Mrs. Spencer says, I have a wonderful treat for you. Next week when you come, I'm going to put you on a record. My mother thought this was a great idea. We had records at home. They were flat. And we went to the movies and they had cartoons before the movies. And you know what happens to people in cartoons? They get flat. And I could only assume that if I was going to be put on a record, I was gonna be flat. And I didn't like that idea at all. But I was a well-behaved child. So the next week, we're ready to go. I've practiced my song. Everything's fine. I am wearing my best dress, my Sunday school dress, because I'm going to be flattened out and dead and going to heaven, so I might as well be dressed for it. So we get there and Mrs. Spencer says, here is the machine I'm going to record you on, and it's about the size of a refrigerator in a hotel room. And I thought, do I have to get in there? And she says, you go over to the piano and sit down and play your piece, and we will get you on the record. Cool, I guess. I don't know where I get flattened out. So I go over and I sit down and I start playing. And I'm doing a nice job because this is an easy song for me. It still is. I can talk while I play it. And things things are going along well and I'm not getting any flatter. And I start thinking about this and I think, maybe this all happens when I get to the end of the song.
Oh, gosh.
So I start playing really slowly. So I won't get to the end of the song. And then I think, well, I will eventually get there. And I looked around and I was still round. My legs were round, my arms were round. I wasn't flat. I was a success. I was a child prodigy. And forevermore, I know that I will not die when I play. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm really sorry that I have to go and don't get to listen to anybody else, but I have to take tickets at a concert at 3 o'clock.
Well, we hope we get to hear you again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Alex, that was incredible. Thank you so much. That was really
Let us
good.
know when you're
Can we
gonna
help
do
you?
this again. We'll come on.
Mark, thanks so much.
And Mary, thank you for
Thank you, Lord.
helping out on that. That was wonderful, Alex. Okay, let's go ahead and try. Let's go ahead and try.
Figure out which way this thing goes. Okay, here we go. So we're gonna get him on. I'll hook him up and then you can talk. We should be able to hear you.
Okay. So we've had some technical difficulties with our next poet.
Hi, Gary, this is Andy. I'm gonna plug you in, hold on. Okay, how's that? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Gary.
Hey, John.
Hi. All right, I haven't done your intro yet, so you're gonna have to listen to that. Okay,
So is this as loud as it gets?
what's that?
I'm talking to Cindy.
Okay, all right. Okay, our poet, one of our poets today is Gary Shills. Gary is a friend of mine for over 50 years. He lives in northern Michigan on a 100-year-old renovated farmhouse that used to be a flower farm. He's a poet, percussionist, wood carver, teacher, farmer, fly fisherman. Currently plays music with a group called Boundary Water Trio that has been featured in Irish Magazine and on Interlochen Public Radio. He and his wife Sylvia were founding members of a public charter school for the fine arts and taught dance and theater for over 20 years. Gary also wrote an opera in which a fly fisherman was the protagonist. All of Gary's arts focus and incorporate the beauty and wonder of nature and wildlife of Michigan and the North Woods. He gave me his fall story, but it's way too long. But suffice it to say that it incorporates all these loves of his life: nature, fly fishing, family, brown trout, and beer. So here is our poet, Gary Shills.
Wow, thank you. You read it in the long order, though. The spear should be first.
Beer should be.
All right. I have a couple of poems. I probably won't take 10 minutes, but this first poem would probably serve as my autumn splendor poem. It's fly fishing on the Escanaba River. Leaves of exquisite color float and swirl on the river like love letters from trees. If all mortals could pass their days this way, casting turkey quilled hoppers, bouncing them off the banks, jerking them out the streamside grass to splat on the water like windblown naturals, all mortals, at least in their minds, would become immortal. This next poem is called Autumn Comes, Winter Calls. I have a whole book just sitting in my computer of poems. And the protagonist is Lai Po, who was a poet of the Tang dynasty in China. He was born in 701. He had a proclivity for wandering, drinking beer, writing poetry, and looking at the moon. So here we go. 1. On Lost Lake, Lai Po paddles his canoe. A small keg of beer, a tent, a blanket, and a bag of mixed nuts, his only cargo. He looks at the palm of his hand and sees the naked body of his mistress dancing, swirling lightly as if on a music box. Solitude and time wake him from this dream. The music stops. Even the whippoorwills fall silent. A blister blossoms on the palm of his left hand, but not from pirouettes. As the drifter drifts, memories swirl like paddle strokes, dissipating into dark waters. The good days pass course through his mind. The good days course through his mind as the river flows beneath his canoe. 2. Seeking ground to make camp, Lai Po wonders, have I wasted my life fishing rivers and streams for trout? His bank account tells him so. Careful not to scratch the bottom of his craft on the gravel shore, he gently banks his canoe. Before setting camp, he stands and scans the river for rising trout. No one from Citibank will deposit this investment, but Lai Po doesn't give a damn. 3. Years pass. Lai Po's hair is white as a cloud. His canoe, upside down, gathers dust. He lies by the creek, a stone for a pillow. The autumn leaves above brighter than June flowers. His 8 decades are fields of ferns, leaning on one another to support themselves against the wind. A brown thrasher talking in tongue tells his kind, it's time to go, it's time to go. As the creek converses with stones, Lai Po hears voices of lovers past. He used to bound from rock to rock like a mink. Youth was his animal. Now his mind is his animal. As he reads, his head rests on a rock. He imagines a flock of sandhill cranes soaring beyond the sky as the pages in his book turn into wings. His body is still as a Miocene crane fossil found in Nebraska, 10 million years old. But his mind is a bird that never rests. And this will be my last poem. Oh, thank you. John said this was his favorite of the ones I sent him, so that's why I chose this one. It's called Lost and Found. We have a cabin up north, this is not the poem, but we have a cabin up north for my family in Gwynn, or outside of Gwynn on Bass Lake in the UP, and that's where we spend as much time as possible. And this poem kind of takes place there, although we live on Bass Lake. I took some latitude and I called the Lake Muskellunge because we used to catch muskellunge in that lake. Anyways, lost and found. Poplar leaves float stem up like yellow sailboats moored on Lake Muskellunge. The glassy water reflects in duplicate the trees on the shoreline, bright reds, yellows, pine needle. A serious blue sky is likewise revealed, interspersed with cumulus clouds meandering above autumn's splendor. 2 young loons lost paddled near dockside, their biological conceivers long gone, migrated south to winter in Florida. The full-grown fledglings left to fend for themselves. Coded deep in a strand of DNA is a map that will guide the birds to winter waters. It is merely a matter of trust in taking flight. The loons in chorus amid a wailing tremolo, sounding much like Hank Williams' melancholy yodel. Let me travel this land from the mountain to the sea, for when the Lord made me, he made a rambling man. Two baby loons water walk Lake Musqueam to gain momentum, take flight, and in a gradual, graceful arc, turn south.
Ah,
Thank you, John. John said he was sold because I quote Hank Williams in there. So that's why I made the cut.
Well, thank you, Gary. That was,
I want to thank John for giving me this opportunity. And John, I hope we get together sometime in the future.
yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, I that was just a really, really
You need
beautiful.
the phone, give him the phone back.
Oh,
Okay, keep talking if you're talking to him.
okay. Yeah, I just gonna let him finish this. That was just a really beautiful depiction of northern Michigan and the fall and just really nice description, Gary. Thank you. So
Thank you.
we're gonna cut you off now, Gary.
Okay.
All right, thanks so much.
Adios.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, our next speaker, our guest speaker is Phyllis Blackstone. I met Phyllis in Maine. Phyllis is the beating heart of the Central Coast Maine Storytelling Group. She is a retired educator and professor who used storytelling as her preferred teaching tool for from first graders to grad students. In retirement, she tells stories of wisdom and truth, including folk tales, personal tales, creative narratives. Her audience include people of all ages, from classrooms, retirement homes, street fairs, farmers markets, etc. She's written a book called My Storied Life, which is an eclectic collection of real and imagined stories that will bring both laughter and tears. Phyllis currently resides in Brunswick, Maine. By the way, did I introduce her as Dr. Phyllis Blackstone? I'm not sure if I did or not, but it's Dr. Phyllis, so I better get that in. Her autumn memory. As a teacher for 43 years, autumn signified the beginning of the new school year. In retirement, I immerse myself in the beautiful colors of New England foliage. I breathe in the beauty until my soul is satisfied, bidding adieu to the leaves, promising to hibernate with them through the bleak but beautiful winter and welcome their green, lacy emergence in the spring. So, ladies and gentlemen, Phyllis Blackstone.
Hello, greetings to all of you from mid-coast Maine. I live on this edge, the eastern edge of the United States. And though there is much land that separates us, we are connected through storytelling and also Zoom, of course. I am so grateful to John for inviting me to join you today. I am enjoying this program immensely. It has been a pleasure this summer to get acquainted with John and his wife, Rebecca, and I hope they come next summer too. For those of you who have never been to the state of Maine, you are welcome to visit at any time. And for those of you who have been to the state of Maine, perhaps you have visited our famed Acadia National Park. Now, to get to Acadia National Park, you would fly into a place like Portland or Bangor and make your way to Route 1 to the town of Bar Harbor, Maine. Once you are in Bar Harbor, you will drive up a very twisty, turny road to the top of Mount Cadillac. Once you are on the top of Mount Cadillac, you are treated to a spectacular view of the many islands in the Atlantic Ocean, many, many ships. And it is in these waters that our story begins today. Two lobstermen by the names of Jim and Lou put their lobster boat into these waters each morning at sunrise, from sunrise to sunset, 365 days a year. Now, lobstering is very hard business. First, there is the toting of all of those lobster pots, and then putting all of that stinky bait inside. Taking the lobster traps out onto the water and dropping them into the Atlantic Ocean. And then when that is done, returning and starting to haul up the traps to find the day's catch. Once the lobsters are on the boat, each one has to be weighed and measured. The smaller ones have to be put back in the ocean, and the really fine ones are put into a bin that might go to a posh restaurant. Others that are a bit damaged, like having a missing claw or a leg, would be put into another bin to sell to a seafood cooperative. So this is very, very hard work, but it can be very monotonous too, doing the same thing day after day after day. Well, I guess Lou and Jim were feeling a little bit of that monotony on the night that they decided to go into the neighboring town of Ellsworth. They went to Rennie's department store. Now, there are 16 Rennie's department stores in the world, and all 16 are in the state of Maine. They promise that visiting Rennie's is a Maine adventure. So if you want this particular Maine adventure, you must come to Maine to get it. Well, they went to Rennie's department store, to the toy department, and they purchased a set of doll clothes. You know, like for a Barbie doll. Now, the next day, they pulled in one of their traps and they took out a mighty fine looking crustacean. Oh, a 1.5 pound babe that looked really good and was perfect in every way. They dressed her in those Barbie clothes. The white blouse went on, and the blue and red skirt. They were very patriotic lobstermen. Now, the hardest part was getting the pink high heels onto the lobster. Now, a lobster has 8 legs, 4 on each side. So they took the 2 middle legs, pinched them together, and stuffed them into the pink high heel. When it was done, they held her up. Lobster Barbie was born. They bid her a fond farewell and dropped her into the Atlantic Ocean. Then they waited. Well, it didn't take long before their radios started buzzing. Lobster Barbie had got caught in someone else's trap, and that person was so intrigued, he just laughed about it and dropped her into the ocean and buzzed about it on the radios. Well, that's how it went for the next 3 days. Oh, the lobstermen in those waters were curious to find out where Lobster Barbie would show up next. And I figured that Lobster Barbie had at least cheated death a dozen times because no one wanted to put Lobster Barbie into a pot of boiling water. Well, the next time that Lobster Barbie showed up in Lou and Jim's trap, oh, she looked like she had been on a wild ride. Her blouse was torn, her skirt was tattered, and one high heel was missing, and the other was just barely hanging on. But that was okay, because they just took out the fresh new fashions from Granny's, and they dressed her again and put her back into the Atlantic Ocean. Now, some of you might think that this is not a true story, but I would invite you to go to your internet and Google Lobster Barbie. Now, I must warn you, you're going to have to scroll through many, many recipes of how to cook lobster on the barbecue. Just keep scrolling, and eventually you will come to a newspaper article from the Portland Press Herald on December 23rd, 2006, and you will read the true story of Lobster Barbie.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phyllis, and thank you for educating everyone about Maine. Maine is an incredibly beautiful, wonderful place, and all the Mainers are very proud of it. And Becky used to have a neighbor that lived in Washington, called himself a maniac, but the real name is Mainer. The real name is Mainer. Thank you very much, Phyllis. Our next poet is Rose Ann Goodwin. And Rose Ann has an on and off again relationship with her writing. While she wishes she were more devoted, she does, when she's not devoted, it does provide her time to do other things like walk the dog, watch British TV, and when she's in the mood, even clean the house. But when feeling the magic, she writes poetry and creative nonfiction. And between her love of nature and her large eclectic family, she has more material than she could possibly use in a lifetime. She knows that if she were a more faithful partner with her writing, they would make beautiful music together. So her autumn memory is really quite long. But Roseanne has lived in the high desert and the Midwest her entire life, so autumn has always been a relief after the sweltering summer. And she loves to see the change in the air and the brilliance of the trees. And she provided a detailed story of when she met her husband at a Latin dance club in downtown Sacramento, and how he courted her on a motorcycle trip on Halloween to the Amador County, and Halloween parties and Apple Hill and much more, but it's too long to go into all the details. But thank you, and here is Roseanne.
Danny told me you'd edit it for me. And following Lobster Barbie is no easy feat. And my poetry is all over the place. But I think autumn is a time of transition, so a lot of my things are about transitioning. Morning walk and worry. The air is brisk, my stride as well. Dogs to pet, smiles to return. Soothing music, deep breaths. The trees show no sign of fall, but soon I will wake to their vibrant glory. These simple luxuries are my reality, or perhaps my fantasy. I soak in the beauty and love around me to counter the heaviness in my soul, the ache in my heart. The world is on fire and no one has a hose.
Ah, nice.
This next one kind of fits with the political season. We must. My prayer to the God with a capital G is no longer for understanding or the ability to cope, as these things are too passive in nature. Today, I pray for a voice, for the will to take action. And I don't mean on the social media soapbox, where if you're not preaching to the choir, you will be unfollowed, unfriended, or mocked. I am frustrated by the talking heads with a promise to be honest and balanced, when we know it's the bottom line for the bottom feeders that really matters. We only hear a small part of the story because they know we are lazy and won't investigate, because after all, it's their job and we will just take their word for it. And I wonder, what have we learned since the beginning of time when the ancient philosophers were debating the meaning of life? Oh, we've had our moments, the Emancipation Proclamation, the 19th Amendment, the Civil Rights Movement, women's right to choose, open arms for the immigrant and the refugee, and the right to love who we love. But we must not take these moments for granted, become complacent, or simply try to understand or cope. We must act, we must educate ourselves, we must make our voices heard.
Yeah.
And the next two are really about my parents, both. My dad passed earlier this year, my mother 3 years ago, but they had many changes in their life, and these kind of cover those from my perspective. Pretty is as pretty does. As a child, I never noticed your jet black hair and your eyes to match, your olive skin, brilliant smile, and slender waist. Pretty is as pretty does, you said, as I admired my 5-year-old reflection. I thought it meant I wasn't pretty, but could compensate by being a good girl. Is that why I missed your beauty? Because you struggled with doing pretty? Daily mass, rosaries prayed, indulgences paid, was not enough to overcome your struggles with raising 9 children and loving an indifferent man. Your temper ruled the roost. But the passing decades brought my own children and an empathy for your life's battles, a somber understanding of what it means to be a woman, wife, mother, daughter. Who do you please? Certainly not yourself. Too many mouths to feed, egos to stroke, dreams abated for the sake of others. Decades more and your life is altered and relegated to a chair for your children and grandchildren to gather around. Is it here that we came to know, by looking in each other's eyes and speaking of times with tenderness and forgiveness, that the true nature of beauty is not always seen or understood in the moment it is beheld, but perhaps meant to be appreciated when the lessons are learned and the wounds have healed. And this one I read for my dad's memorial. Why can I wax poetic about my mother? But when it comes to my father, the words are harder to find. I didn't love my mother any more than my father. But it was a different kind of love. Our mother's love could be rough around the edges, but also soft and warm. She said the words. Dad did not. He occupied the world in a different space, not one for introspection. He let us in just so far, but not too much beneath the surface, lest we see his vulnerability and the scars inflicted by the reality of a life he kept to himself. For many years, Dad, Pat, and Pat would never be confused for one another, separate names for separate lives. For many years, he was a man of his generation, a good provider, private but not secretive in his faith and politics, an attentive friend, but perhaps lacking in his ability to be attentive to his wife and family. Thankfully, times and people change. Was there a moment or a gradual evolution that brought Dad and Pat together to share in the joys of being both father and friend? As our family grew, both in numbers and in love, hearts opened. He found the words to express his love and pride. And I knew when I said those previously unrequited words, I love you, Dad, I would hear in return, I love you too, kiddo. This one is called Home. The land of enchantment, pueblos, tribes, and nations, Mexicans and missionaries, cowboys and aliens, an ever-changing landscape, clean, thin air, relentless sunshine in an impossible blue sky, thunderclouds stingy with their rain, frigid, starry nights, humble brown earth, noble green pines, high desert, rugged mountains, boisterous rivers, thirsty arroyos, hatch green chili burns, while honey on sopapillas soothe. Oh, how I miss this feast called New Mexico. And on a lighter note, puppy love. They are little monsters, you know, with their needle teeth and sharp claws, drawing blood without a thought. But those eyes, they fool you and pull you in to their foolishness. And once they have taken hold and you've lost sleep at least one pair of shoes, you wonder, how has this creature taken over your heart, regardless of the whining, the peeing, the pooping? You overlook what this monster has done. You only notice the preciousness of his face, the silliness of his play, the love in his gaze. You overcome your differences and you wonder, who is training who?
Thank you, Roseanne, for some very heartfelt and great poetry. And you talked in your intro about you have this on and off relationship with writing, but I think some of those poems could not have come right away. They took a lot of percolating to come to the top. So thank you so much. Our next storyteller is Lawrence Grayson, commonly known as Sir Lawrence. So I will wait for Andy to get him on the phone.
I gotta give him a call. Okay. Lawrence Grayson.
For those that don't know, when he's blind, and so that's why he's, so it has development.
Who's that gray hair thing? Uh-oh. Hey, Larry, how are you? I'm gonna plug you in. And Joe's gonna introduce you, okay?
Lawrence, can you say something? Make sure we can hear you.
Hello there,
You are here. You are here. Thank you.
I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, as I said, Lawrence is known as Sir Lawrence in the storytelling circuit. Lawrence is totally blind. He tells stories across the West and in Canada to schools, refugees, and other groups. He likes to tell stories that are meaningful, and he tells them all by memory, does not write them down. And for those of you who've had the pleasure of talking to Lawrence, he always has a joke. Sometimes they're not the greatest jokes, but he always has a joke. Sorry, Lawrence, I couldn't resist. All right. And Lawrence has fall memories of maple trees turning red and yellow and apple cider and apple pies from Apple Hill. I'm not from Sacramento, so I don't know where Apple Hill is, but I've seen it mentioned a couple times. I'll have to find out. So here we go, Mr. Lawrence, Sir Lawrence.
Good afternoon. My name is Mr. Becker. I lived in Canada on the coast of the Lake Erie. My family is Canadian. I'm an old man now, but when I was about 10 years old, I had two sisters and my mother and father, and an event happened that changed our lives. It was in the autumn. It was beautiful weather. Beautiful trees were in full color. But then a snowstorm came up suddenly at night, and we were in our house with the windows wobbling and turning. In the morning, my mother was downstairs making the house nice and warm, and she looked out the window and saw a little boat crashed up on the shore. She went out in her bare feet in the snow to investigate it. While she was looking at that, she looked up and saw a three-mast schooner out about half a mile out in the bay. There were sailors hanging on the ropes, and they were really, really hard and tired. She knew that the only neighbor was only 14 miles away, too far to get help. The little boat that she discovered was ruined. She looked around for making a raft, but there was no materials to do that. Then she went over to a sheltered area on the shore and made a bonfire to help the sailors have hope. Then she ran into the house and told us kids, "There's a sailing ship that's in trouble. I'm going to help them. Stay in the house and be calm. Son, could you get me lots of blankets? The sailors need to be wrapped up. Daughter, could you make a pot of hot tea and bring it to the door? I'll come back for them." Then I saw my mother go down the shore and yell at something to the sailors. I don't know what she said, but it seemed like one of the sailors was coming down and taking his jacket off and diving into the water. She was encouraging him to swim to her. She will pull him in. She will grab him and bring him in. One by one, each sailor did this. They wrapped him up in blankets, got him hot tea. One of the sailors was having trouble coming in, and the captain dove back into the water and grabbed him, brought him in. All 7 sailors were saved. 2 of them were Americans, 5 were Canadians. The owner of the ship was from Buffalo, New York. They had sailed up the Erie Canal, was full of grain, and got caught in the snowstorm and missed the lighthouse. Because of her action, the Canadian government gave the family, our family, 100 acres for a new farm. The owner of the ship came out to visit us and noticed that we didn't have any shoes and measured all the feet and sent a whole case of shoes for a whole family. There was a company in New York that also
sent us $1,000 of gold to help us. To this day, there is a picture of my mother, Abigail Becker, who is in the local hospital, and there's a whole wing named after her. Simply because she went down and at her risk, yelled to the sailors, swim, swim, you must dive in. Please come, I'll haul you in. And she fulfilled her promise. This happened in 1854. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. It's a very heartfelt story as usual. And it's interesting that we have so many stories from the Great Lakes and the East Coast today. So, okay. Our final teller is David Tarvin. And Dave is a retired public servant turned storyteller. Dave is a consummate professional storyteller, and that he works very hard at his craft. Every one of his stories, he puts weeks of work and into it, editing and re-editing and doing research. His favorite stories are historical fiction, and he tells stories currently via Zoom worldwide. David Tarvin, are you ready? Also, he has this great picture he sent me. It was in color, but it shows him in front of one of these old-fashioned microphones like they had in the 40s. It's a beautiful picture. Dave Tarvin.
Hey, before I begin, I need to check my sound. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. Well, good. Well, autumn is such a wonderful time of year. And my favorite thing to do in the autumn is to take a vacation. Every year when summer ends and autumn begins, I take a vacation to my favorite place in Northern California. A little place called Indian Valley. It's way up, like I said, in Northern California in Plumas County, sparsely populated, surrounded, covered by heavy forest. And my family had a cabin up there when I was a boy. And so I used to go up there all the time, actually for the summers, to visit my grandmother. Well, about 10 years ago, I went up on one of those vacations and I was walking through the forest. And all of a sudden, it started to rain. Not a heavy rain, kind of a light rain. And as it came down, I started to hear this kind of clinking and clacking. And I looked down at the ground and there was these things that were falling from the sky and they were landing on the ground. They were hard, and I reached down and I picked one up, and they were about the size of a quarter. They were clear and they were hard and they were cold. And I looked at it and I was pretty curious. I mean, what could it be? I tasted it. I did that without thinking too clearly, but I did. And I got to tell you, it was wonderful. It's hard to describe what it tasted like. It kind of like had that sweetness of that forest air early in the morning when that mist is on the ground. And it was just so sweet. And it also tasted exactly like my grandmother's Mindy, Molly, Mandy candy that she was famous for. Every year after Thanksgiving, she would bring out this Mindy, Molly, Mandy candy, and we would all have it after Thanksgiving dinner. And whatever was left over, she would hand out to all the neighborhood kids. Well, I always wanted that recipe, but she would never give it to me. Now, Grandma was pretty generous, but not around that recipe. It was a secret. Well, that day, as I stood there in the forest, holding that mysterious piece of candy that just fell from the sky, I realized this is a windfall. I could make a fortune. I could gather all this stuff up and I could bag it and I could sell it. Everybody loved Grandma's Millie Molly Mandy candy. So I took off my jacket, I took off my shirt, and I started scooping all that up off the ground and putting it in piles in my shirt and my coat. And suddenly I noticed all these little forest creatures that came creeping out of the forest. And they too started to gather up all these little pieces of candy. There were squirrels and raccoons, and pretty soon they came for my bundles in my shirt and my jacket. I actually got a tug of war with 3 raccoons over my jacket, which I lost. Well, pretty soon all that candy was gone, and I just had just a little bit left over that I had gathered into my shirt. I went home very sad. Well, I soon forgot about it, but a couple of days later, I was again out walking in the forest. And again, it began to rain. And again, I started to hear that clicking and clacking. And there it was, the Mindy Molly Mandy candy, all laying out on the ground. This time I was determined. So again, I took off my jacket, I took off my shirt, and I started scooping it up and scooping it up. But this time, no squirrels, no raccoons. And I felt confident I would get away with my booty. And I worked faster and faster until all of a sudden I heard this noise. I stood up and I looked off to the right, down at the bottom of the ravine where there was this beautiful little creek. Barreling up out of that ravine came a big black bear. He came barreling up out of that ravine, must have been 90 miles an hour, and he landed right in front of me. He stood up on his legs and threw up his arms and roared at me, not real loud, but more than enough to scare me. Well, I dropped my coat filled with that candy and I just looked at that bear and I thought, what am I going to do? I can't run. He's too close. I can't scare him. He's a big bear, but that's what they tell you to do. They say, make yourself as big as possible. Do something to scare them. So I threw out my arms, I threw out my legs, and I roared right back at him. Roar! The bear did not look pleased, and he did not look scared. Now I started to panic, what to do. Now I have been in a couple of dangerous situations. But there's no way I'm going to wrestle a bear. There was really not much I could do. And then suddenly I had this thought. You see, in my everyday work world, I worked as a counselor with adolescents. If you know anything about adolescents, you know they don't follow directions very well. As a counselor, I was always telling them they had to do this, they had to do that. And I had this little trick, because you can only get so much cooperation from them. And every time I used that trick, those kids would do exactly what I said. Just like that. And I thought, I'm going to try it with the bear. But I threw my arms out even wider. And I started to whirl and to twirl and whirl and whirl around, and I began to sing. Now, I don't sing very well. And I started to sing, "The hills are alive with the sound of music." Well, let me tell you, that bear must have been an adolescent, because as soon as I started singing, he dropped down on all fours, turned around, and he ran off down through the forest. And I was safe once again. Well, I gathered up my jacket and my shirt with as much of my Mindy Molly Mandy candy that I could get, and I went home. And I started to bag it, and I thought, it is kind of a windfall, but I should share it. And so, when Halloween came, I shared it with all the kids in the Indian Valley.
That was a wonderful story, Dave, as usual, and always in the forest, always animals. You just gotta keep using the same setting and just spinning off these wonderful tales one after the other. Thank you very much. So that completes our program today. We have a couple announcements. Karen, would you like to tell us what's going to happen next month?
Hi, everyone. Next month, I'm going to be the hostess. And I have picked for my theme,
Hostess with the mostest.
the hostess with the mostest, of course. And my theme is change. So it can be any change. It can be your personal change. It could be the change in the seasons. Whatever change comes to you, you can share it with us. And we will have 7 to 8 speakers. And so please let me know. And you want, and I'm gonna have Andy come and tell us about the next.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Just wanted to let you know about an event that's happening here at the Sacramento Poetry Center, actually in a theater across the way here. We have a little parking spot. It's Ray Tartar presents Mark Lyon in Darby O'Gill and the Banshees Halloween. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. Anyone who is a Sacramento Storytellers Guild member can call this phone number that's right here, and I'll leave this over here, 916-600-9536, and get a free ticket. Otherwise, they're $15 a ticket. Should be a really fun. He's got 3 dates, October 28th, 29th, and the 30th. So it's $15 for families, or free or more, $10 for each person otherwise, okay?
And he tells an Irish brogue.
Yes. Can I tell it in an Irish brogue, you say? I don't think so, man. Anyway, guys, I hope you can come, and thank you for coming today. Oh,
It's on 7 p.m. Monday, October 17th. It's the ladies of the night. They're back. Carolyn Stevenson Grellis, Angela James, and a new lady has entered the program. I'm probably not going to say it right, but Natichi Mez. So they'll be here on Monday. Sorry. On Monday, the 17th, it's free, it's fun, and they are really good at 7 p.m. It's usually 7:30, but.
Thank you. I think I forgot to thank the Sacramento Poetry Center for allowing us to use this facility as always, and we very much appreciate that. And then Ed Lewis has a couple announcements, one dealing with the celebration, I believe, and then we have a new storyteller he wants to introduce.
Okay, well, there's a couple events coming up. We are going to celebrate Telebration, and if you don't know what that is, it's a national storytelling event that's put on by SWAP groups all throughout the United States. And it's started from the International Storytelling Center in '79, and any groups can celebrate it, and it's to honor storytelling. And professional storytellers donate their time. And so we are going to do 2 events with that. We are going to pair on with Inland Valley storytellers in the Inland Valley of California. Our group, we're going to have 4 storytellers. I'll be the MC. And then we will have 4 storytellers from the Inland Valley group. So we've done that to connect people throughout California, all these storytellers. So they'll have 4 tellers, we'll have 4 tellers. And that's on, you'll get a flyer about it, but it's on Sunday, November 21st. It's always the weekend before Thanksgiving, or now it can be throughout the whole month of November. Our own group, we are going to put on an event the day before on our regular meeting time on November 20th. And we haven't planned that out exactly yet, but we will be planning that out and letting everyone know. Lawrence, who you heard earlier, told me about this great storytelling event. This is pre-COVID, about 3 years, maybe 2014, 2015, by one of the best theater groups, a longtime group in Sacramento called Celebration Arts Theater. And if you ever get a chance, definitely go to their programs. They have amazing programs. But once a year for about 4 years now, just after COVID and then pre-COVID, they put on a storytelling event. And Lawrence told me about it, and I went and did it for a couple of years, and I met some really great storytellers. It was mostly the actors, actresses from their group, but anyone could come. You had to submit a story. And so I was at they just had one, and I was at that event, and I heard this amazing storyteller. And I said, please come to our group and share the story that I heard you tell. And we are very fortunate to have her come today. Her name is Laura Cook. She's an actress. She's got the most amazing voice you can imagine. And she hasn't ever been a storyteller, but she sure was a great storyteller that day. And she's going to come up and share that story with her. So please welcome Laura Cook.
Sister, you've been on my mind. Sister, we're two of a kind. So, sister, I'm keeping my eye on you. I bet you think I don't know nothing but singing the blues. Oh, sister, have I got news for you? I'm something. I hope you think that you're something too. Oh, Scruffland, I've been up that lonesome road, and I've seen a lot of sun going down. Oh, but trust me, no low life's gonna run me around. So let me tell you something, sister. Remember your name, no twister, gonna steal your stuff away, my sister. We sure ain't got a whole lot of time. So shake your shimmy, sister, 'cause sugar, I sure was feeling fine.
Yeah.
If you know anything about the Yoruba people, you might know a little bit about Oya. Y'all feel that?
Oh, yeah.
It's just me. Oya?
Oh yeah.
Oya. Whew. Oya. She is, has been, and is yet becoming like Earth's winds. She has nothing to play with. Summoning change, transitionings laid out before us through forests and plains. And she topples things. But that brings life again. Yes, some have been found lost amidst rooftops and tree trunks tossed, but new lives often cost. Old lives wrought with rot. I once was, but she, Oya, she lifted bins and laid them down. She opened up new grounds, fresh, scented, risen from old deaths, new breaths, witnessed and unseen. She is uprooting. She is the change we dare to dream fearfully. Force, fierce. Ah, her color of wine, her number of 9, her course, rears, shakings and strikings, and the laying lows of, that these newnesses come. So celebrate if you dare honor, oh yeah. Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Oh yeah. I give thanks for the things you revealed. As a result, I reseal fear far from me. For you are revered. And I think of you every single time I sip anew. I'm humbled to my already aching knees. Mine eyes finally see beyond what so many of us deem mere tragedy. Oh yeah, heck what, oh yeah. My yesterdays sing high praise, for without your machete sword, today, oh, sweet today, might never have shown its face. Oh yeah, you are, always have been, and are yet becoming. Amen. I mean, Ashe. Give thanks.
Wow, thank you very much, Laura, and we hope you will come again, will you? So, all right, I think we're gonna shut her down, aren't we? Unless anybody-
Everybody for coming.
Festival.
Oh, the festival in May 2023. Sacramento Valley Storytelling Festival. Let me.
Update on that?
I'll just remind everybody that we are planning a Sacramento Valley Storytelling Festival in May of 2023. Right now, it's a single-day festival. Next year, it'll be a 2-day festival. The year after that, it'll be a 3-day festival. And eventually, he will compete with Jonesboro.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Our technician.